Can we speak about heat pumps in the domestic market?
Yeah. So in the domestic market, obviously this is where it's starting to come into this domestic, because we've been used to sort of fossil fuel boilers, because arguably gas has been very cheap for us. Um, and this is one of the interesting things, gas boilers have a very small variability in their efficiency. So an engineer can put a gas boiler in, put it on the wall, not very well, and it's running at, let's say, 78% efficiency. But they could also then go and put it in really well, it'll run at 96. But you're only talking a very small variability there. If you put a heat pump in bad and it's running at sort of 240% efficiency, or you put it in well and it runs at 500% efficiency, there's a massive, you know, sort of the variability between them 2 points is quite big. So that's why it's really important to put these heat pump systems in properly. But it's also worth pointing out that heating is a system. One of the big problems we've had in the industry is your boiler manufacturers will market their boilers as they're really, really efficient, and the same with the heat pump industry. They're marketing their heat pumps as if they're really, really efficient. And heating is a system. And the analogy I always use is, Usain Bolt's got a very, very efficient heart to be able to pump all that oxygen around his blood, the body quick enough. But if you transplanted that super duper efficient heart into my body, I won't be able to run any faster or for any longer because I'm a bit overweight. My system isn't optimum. So it's the same with boilers. You can plug the most efficient boiler or the most efficient heat pump into a home, but it's not going to be efficient unless the system's efficient. But yeah, we come back to your point. We're starting to think about putting them into homes. They are going into homes. They've been going into homes for 20 years. I know people that have been putting them in for 20 years. And if they're put in well, they work really well. But if they're not put in well and the system isn't designed or commissioned properly, you can pay very, very high bills. And of course, this is what we tend to hear about. We tend to hear about the horror story ones.
So what about the government push now for heat pumps? As you're saying, you hear about the horror stories. Lots of houses would need to be optimized in order to put in a domestic heat pump into them, which obviously would be a huge amount of cost, which a lot of people can't afford at the moment. So with this government push, and I know they've just put the grant up from, I think, it was 5 grand, it's now 7.5 grand, but the average cost of a heat pump upwards of 15 grand, and then you can put possibly another 10 to 15 grand on top of that in regards to insulation, cavity wall insulation, double glazing, UPVC windows. Not every single property is suited for a heat pump. Domestically, we're talking, obviously, not talking commercially. And it's not always cost effective to make it so. So what do you think about the government push that? They gave a certain figure, I can't remember what it was, but they wanted X amount of installs, heat pump installs a year.
600,000 installs.
That was the number. Thanks, Ben.
Yeah, 600,000.
Can I just come in there quickly before you reply, Nathan? Because obviously last week, the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, he came and gave this big speech. A few things that he mentioned was that there was going to be a relaxation on when new zero emission cars would come in. They're no longer going to be coming in 2035. It's going to be, I think, 5 years back from that, so 2040, where we will no longer be able to buy new fossil fuel cars. Also, the 2035 phase out target for gas boilers, he's relaxed that as well. So it was apparently 2035 was when gas boilers would be banned from. You wouldn't be able to buy a new gas boiler from the shops anymore. You'd have to buy an air source heat pump. He's now relaxed it slightly, and the poorest households apparently will get an exemption and will be able to buy a gas boiler, which I find very interesting because I remember when condensing boilers came out, there was a possibility that we didn't have to install a condensing boiler. Right at the very beginning, you could say, it was too hard to install a condense pipe, and therefore we wouldn't have to put in a condensing boiler. We could put in a standard efficiency boiler, but we had to fill out a form, and I don't ever remember filling out a single form. I always found a way to run a condensing pipe for my new condensing boiler. So I think this is going to be something that is going to be taken into account as well. I think poor people will, I say poor, it's such a terrible word, but it's what they've got on the website, the poorest households. I do think that there's going to be people are really going to have to think seriously about whether they want to actually go back to a gas boiler. I really believe that by 2035, gas prices will be so high compared to electricity prices that you would want to go onto an air source heat pump by then, and you no longer would want to put in a gas boiler. Part of that will be because as fewer and fewer people put in gas boilers and more people put in air source heat pumps, the price of gas will have to go up because the energy suppliers will still be producing gas and they still need to sell it, but they're selling it to a smaller and smaller market. So that's why I think that the poorest households that Rishi Sunak was so worried about, that they are able to have a get out of jail free card by 2035, I think they will still need to have an air source heat pump installed. Just some thoughts I'm throwing in there.
Okay, but just the cost, though, the cost of the installation and the significant difficulty which can be on certain properties with the installation of the heat pump, space to put the cylinder, space outside to put the pump, upgrading of the pipework and radiators, etc., etc.
Yeah, there's obviously the capex, the upfront costs. I mean, obviously heat pumps, they're going to range. The actual heat pump ranges between about £1,800 to about £4,000, and then obviously you got this. So it's the install cost. There is this sort of mythology that we need to upgrade a home to have a heat. Any home can be heated with a heat pump. Any home can be heated with human body heat. Any home, and that's where I come back to people have sort of lost touch with how heat moves. So your average home in the UK. Average, obviously, there's lots of different types. Your average home in the UK is 8 kilowatts. What does that mean? Well, you need 8 kilowatts of power for when it's -3. That's the design temperature in the UK. 8,000 joules per second. So that means if it's 10 degrees outside, your home now only needs 3.7 kilowatts. So it's always changing. Your temperature's outside always changing, which means the temperature or the speed of heat that we need to push into the home always changes. So a home that needed 8 kilowatts, when it's -3, you could have a party with 80 people dancing around because we all emit 100 watts when we're dancing and heat that home and maintain it at 21. If it gets to 10 degrees outside, you can beat most of the people out and you only need 37 people. So there's this bit of a myth that you need insulated homes to heat them with heat pumps because heat pumps are considered low temp. Temperature and energy are two different things. They're the same. They've got a massive relationship with each other, but they're different things. Energy and temperature are different things. So if your home needs 8 kilowatts of power, which is 8,000 joules of energy per second, it's not going to need that for most of winter. And you can provide that. Like I say, 1960s homes only had single panel radiators. They didn't have double convectors. They had single panel radiators. And if it was 80-degree water, they could push out. But back then they needed about 10,000 joules per second. They could push that out. If it's 10 degrees outside, you only need to push out 5,000 joules per second. So you only needed 50-degree water rates. So this notion that we need to upgrade the fabric of a home is a little bit overplayed. When it comes to pipe work, depending on what size heat load you need, so you do your heat loss calculations. If you need sort of like 20 kilowatts, yes, you're going to have to upgrade some pipe work for sure. But not always does pipework have to be upgraded, and not always does rads have to be upgraded. No one has sort of single panels everywhere anymore. Lots of people do have double panel, double convector rads. So it's a horses for courses. You go and look at the home. All homes are different. Everyone's done lots of different things to their homes over the years. So for some people, disruption can be low, and for some people, cost can be low of anything to be upgraded. But that's not for everyone. Some people it's going to be disruptive. Some people haven't got space. Some people haven't got space.
Sorry to interrupt you, but is it fair for the government to push that disruption and cost on someone, for somebody who may not have the space for a hot water cylinder, may not have the external room for the heat pump, etc., etc.?
Well, the government have got an obligation, haven't they, since 2008 to decarbonise heating. So they've got, and the best way to decarbonise heating is with heat pumps. We know that. There's no better technology at the moment. The technology is sound. It's been around longer than natural gas boilers. The poor old person in the middle is the homeowner. Not all of them are going to be able to do this easily. So the government have got to come up with some very clever ways, some incentives. So obviously the financial sector that's circling the industry are sort of thinking of ways, well, can they get involved? Whether it's 0% interest loans, etc., etc. But the government has the commitment. They want, our country wants to sort of lead on this technology, or lead on sort of getting things done right. But yeah, it's gonna cause some problems. We're in a transitional stage, so obviously in any transitional stage, there's going to be a lot of bumps along the way.
It's like the the ultra low emission zone that they have in London, which I believe people down south are not too happy about. Well, they tried putting a fresh air zone into Manchester, which would have been a similar thing, and they also wanted people to upgrade their vehicles, etc. But the financial help just wasn't there. They couldn't roll it out. The government completely messed it all up, and currently the whole scheme is under review, and they won't be